Everybody, welcome to our November webinar. Welcome to my Abundance 360 members, my Abundance Digital members, and it's a pleasure. I'm here with Serge Faguet. Serge,
nice to meet you.
Pleasure to have you here. And we're in for a really fun webinar. Now, I've slated this one for 90 minutes because we're going to be going through a lot of information. And if you have 90 minutes, please give it. Otherwise, we're going to be giving you the recording of the program for you to watch again. And Serge, we're going to be going into really the extraordinary biohacking you've done. And it's an area that I'm fascinated with. How do you increase your focus, your happiness, your intelligence, your longevity, your health, all aspects. And you have been doing a very deep dive into this. And we're going to go and talk about all of these things. And for those of you watching, my specific goal is that you're going to walk away with very concrete things that you can do. Now, you know that I've got an extraordinary focus on longevity. Serge, also passionate about this. I was introduced to Serge by a common friend, another Abundance 360 member, Jeff Holden, who's the Chief Product Officer at Uber. And we'll talk about whether or not we've reached longevity escape velocity, as Ray Kurzweil talks about it, but just the notion that we're learning so much that you can start to take your longevity, your health, your overall performance into your own hands.
Yeah, I mean, essentially we're at a point where we can say to ourselves, hey, you know, everything in our lives comes down to the biochemistry of our bodies. So if we want more performance, more happiness, you know, we should be attacking the problem at the source. And now science is enabling us to do that in the right way.
So that's our conversation over the next 90 minutes. And if you stick with me and Serge on this, I'm sitting here with my notebook ready to take notes. At the end of the day, I want to walk away with very real, concrete things that I can change in my life right now to make life better. So let's begin first, Serge, with a proper introduction about your background, because it's more than just a biohacker. Biohacking has been your sort of hobby. And you publish some great pieces on that, but tell us about yourself.
Sure. So my background, I'm Russian. I was born in Siberia in an academic town where my grandfather was developing algorithms, math algorithms for Soviet ballistic missile programs and the like. So kind of an engineering family, grew up with a lot of science fiction. And I got really interested in the idea of kind of extending your life, becoming a post-human, getting to the singularity from a very early age. So professionally, I'm a technology entrepreneur. So I went to undergrad at Cornell, went to business school at Stanford, dropped out, started a company called TalkBox, which is now a leading video communication kind of B2B infrastructure player that was funded by Sequoia Capital. Got fired by Sequoia Capital at the age of 21, which I guess makes me a member of a cool club. But then I started a company in Russia called Ostrovok, which is the local leader in the online travel market. It's a hotel booking company. We do about $500 million in turnover. It's profitable, like 450 people working there. And I retired from there at the end of last year and started a new company in AI and computer vision. We're going to announce it pretty soon, so it's kind of in stealth yet at this point, but soon.
Can you say the name of the company?
I'd rather not.
Okay.
So we're going to announce it soon.
It's a cool company. We'll share it once it comes out. But you published this this great piece that I've sent out to everybody, and it says, I'm 32 and I spent $200,000 in biohacking, became calmer, thinner, extroverted, happier, and healthier. And I've read through it, and a lot of this are things that either I'm doing or have thought about doing. And we're going to go into this because I love the idea of not sort of assuming you can't do anything, where it's empowering yourself and deciding what you want to do and then doing it and making small incremental changes that build up. So what was the formative moment when you said, enough is enough, I need to change, and I'm gonna figure out what to do?
I think part of it was just a philosophical engineering mindset that just says to yourself, you know, everything that's in the world is actually going in your head, and you have to be, so if by attacking the problem there, you could become stronger, smarter, etc. But the specific thing that helped me was when I started sleeping more. So this sounds really boring, but I started sleeping significantly more, and I noticed that I would procrastinate less, that I would have fewer anger management issues, that I would be able to be in the flow more. And I kind of said to myself, hey, you know, what else can I get like that? So that was an early quick win that just told me, hey, this you know, works. And it's obvious that sleep should help you perform better. And then after that, I just started gradually taking kind of more supplements, trying out testing. So I really got into the whole doing a lot of blood tests and looking at the dynamics of the various biomarkers in your blood. Mm-hmm. And at some point, so I have a mutation, genetic mutation that makes it hard to metabolize vitamin B12, yep. So called MTHFR. And I take a large dose of vitamin B12 to compensate for it. And it was like a significant step function in how I felt when I started doing that. So I became even calmer, I started sleeping better, etc. And that to me was also like, hey, I just used genetic analysis tools, which didn't exist, you know, 15 years ago, and a targeted intervention that is specific to me, and I've seen significant benefits. And then after that, it was just like, where can I get more? Because I do feel like we are biorobots. We are
right? We're biological machines.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're running a software code. We have hardware in each cell, hardware at metastructures called organs and organ systems, and it runs based upon the environment and the input and the output and so forth.
Absolutely. And then, you know, I started just talking with smart people. So my main doctor who's helping me do this is Peter Attia, who I'm sure some of you guys have read some of his writings and heard him on the Tim Ferriss show, etc. So he's a guy who went to Stanford Medical School, worked at Johns Hopkins, and really got into this personalized health optimization. He works with about, I think, 40 people who really want to get maximum performance out of themselves. And, you know, I just kept talking to people, learning, trying new things, keeping what I liked. And so many people were excited about it. I gave a bunch of public talks and people would always ask questions. And so I put together the post just to be able to share it with others. And it got a really exciting reception. So I think it reached in total like over 5 million people, which is amazing for such a detailed, lengthy scientific thing.
And so my goal with you here is the following. I think that as part of a life of abundance, having a longer life and a healthier life is critically important. And as a scientist, an engineer, a physician, all those things, I'm searching for best-in-class knowledge. And I'm going to make this an underlying theme because at the end of the day, if having you as a member of the abundance community can make you feel better, be healthier, live longer as a side effect, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and I would just add one thing. I mean, think about it. Your body and your mind, the biology, is actually the system on which all of your other performance, whether it's, you know, relationships or whether it's work or whether it's, athletic performance, all of these rest on this system. So you might as well optimize this system because it's the most crucial one you have.
Agreed. So we're experimenting on this webinar with Slido. So down below on your page is a Slido button. I'm guessing, Bree, is that correct? So that you can click on to ask questions. I've seen a lot of you have started using that, and we're going to be going through. Let me tell you the format that I want to do for this webinar that Serge and I discussed. We're going to break this webinar into 6 segments, and I'm going to be taking notes for myself, so suggest you do too. We're going to cover each section and do questions on each section as we go forward. So if you've posted questions, we're going to ask you to potentially repost them during the section. So we're going to cover sleep first, then nutrition, then exercise, mental health, medical tests, and then supplements and drugs as the 6th area. And my goal with you as we talk about each of these, I'm going to ask we'll discuss it for a little bit. I'm going to ask you for, like, what are one or two things that a person could do right now in each of these areas that they could adapt today, or this week, or this month, to begin changing their life, and then we'll do some questions about each of that. So if that's okay with you, this will make it much more actionable.
Yep.
And then I'm sure I'm seeing questions on metformin and on morning and night routines. We'll work these in as we go forward. So let's begin with sleep. Probably one of the most underrated parts of feeling good, performing well, and so forth. So let's talk about it. What are your thoughts?
So the first thing is that sleep is a must-have in this system, as is actually most of this stuff. But if you do not sleep well, you're not going to have the willpower to execute on these other things. And I think as a society, we also have somewhat counterproductive attitudes to sleep. I know that personally when I was in business school or in Silicon Valley, the attitude would be, hey, I am sleeping so little. I'm such a strong, cool guy. I'm getting so much done. It's actually, I don't think that's true. I found that there's no circumstances where getting extra it's always the case that getting a bit of extra sleep, that's good, that saves you more time later in things like procrastination, etc.
Yeah, I'll just say for myself, I used to think about islands of stability, and I would shoot for 5.5 hours because that's when I felt like I had some stability in my sleep cycle. But I am clear that if I can get at least 7 hours or 8 hours, I will grab it.
Yeah, I think so. To go through Peter's idea of the most actionable two things on sleep, I would say that first is just to measure. So if we can hop over to the slides. So I really like the Aura ring.
So you guys know this ring, right? And those of you who are in attendance at Abundance 360 this year, Aura is going to be there. We're going to be debuting their next version of their ring.
Cool.
And so we're going to be getting a lot more deeper, so you have the chance to play with it. We'll probably provide access to it at a significant discount. I've gotten one, and anyway, so the Aura ring, yes. So we're showing on the slide here what you get when you get this.
Yeah, the kind of data that you get. And the important thing is that you really want to know how much you're actually sleeping, because if you lie down and then you get up 8 hours later, you haven't actually slept 8 hours. You could be sleeping only 7 hours or less. You certainly will waste at least half an hour on kind of the falling asleep or when you just awoke but are a bit groggy. So you want to see consistent trends, and you also want to see whether you're spending sleep time in deep sleep and REM sleep. So these are the two key restorative phases of sleep. And what I found is that a lot of people, for example, have trouble with deep sleep. Very many people, including people you wouldn't think have problems. So essentially, this suggests to you, hey, maybe I shouldn't be drinking those 2 glasses of wine before sleep, because wine is known to disrupt deep sleep. But maybe you're okay on it, and you don't have to change anything about your behavior. So the first thing I would do is just measure. The second important thing that I would try doing is waking up at exactly the same time every day. So, and the reason for that is that going to sleep at exactly the same time is impossible. Like, it's not possible, because you could be excited about something, or something could be going on, or a friend calls. It just doesn't work. So, but getting up at the same time is actually feasible. And if you do that, it kind of forces you to start getting tired by a certain time in the evening. So you maintain your circadian rhythm as much as possible. So I tried to set a thing for me that I would move my alarm wake-up time in the morning by no more than 15 to 20 minutes a day. So that would kind of force me into a relatively regular sleep schedule. So that's what I would focus on the most, and they're not, these are not hard things to do, and they do have an impact on. So I felt that specifically with sleep, I procrastinated less, I was more in control of my own emotional stability.
And a couple of things around that. You mentioned drinking alcohol at night can disrupt your sleep cycle. Also, eating late at night can do that. And so your recommendation is, I think your recommendation is you don't drink alcohol, or a little bit.
I almost never drink alcohol, so I sometimes socially hold a glass in my hand and sip it a little bit. Yeah. But I find it does disrupt sleep. So my recommendation is really just to measure and then keep in mind what you've been doing and kind of try to see the correlations, because so I find that whenever I work out late in the day, I have an elevated heart rate at night, and that seems to be somewhat disruptive to sleep. If I drink coffee after like 4 or 5 p.m., I'll also have disrupted sleep. So it's kind of that thing.
In the whole A360 community, one of the things we talk about is experimentation and collecting data and making data-driven choices in your life. So let's talk a little bit about any questions that you're having here for in the sleep arena. Is there anything else you want to mention about sleep in particular?
I mean,
how much do you think a person should be targeting? And I know it varies, but
I try to get 8 hours of actual sleep, which tends to take like 8 hours, 45 minutes of being in bed.
And so what time do you typically try and go to bed, and what time do you have a hard wake up?
So I typically have a hard wake up at 6:30 in the morning. Yeah. So, and consequently, I go to sleep around 10 in the evening. Which is
what, if you're interested, roughly what I do as well. 6:30 is when my kids jump in bed, so it's my alarm system period.
So aside from that, there's other things like, people wear orange glasses in the evening to kind of block blue light. That seems to help.
This is Dave Asprey's glasses that he has, and it just helps you, especially at night,
produce melatonin.
Melatonin, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you suggest taking melatonin as a supplement?
I take like a little mix of a tiny amount of melatonin, 5-HTP, GABA-PH.
And we'll talk about that in the supplement section.
Yeah. It's like essentially physiological doses that kind of jumpstart your brain to production of these things, but they're not a huge amount. So,
Darren is asking here, what biohacks help most with increasing the amount of deep sleep?
Yeah, so this is indeed the hardest part of the sleep cycle to improve. My sense from what I've seen is that its regularity of sleep helps. Essentially, like you want, if we're still on the slide, you want your deep sleep and REM sleep to look like mine. So the dark piece of the graph there in the early part of the night is deep sleep, and the light part is REM sleep. So if you're getting enough sleep and it's consistent, then the REM sleep doesn't seem to be as disruptive to the deep sleep in the early part of the night. So
I'm looking at my app as well here. So. Yeah, I got 1 hour, 3 minutes last night.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
Deep sleep, yeah.
Yeah. So I think aside from that, you just have to experiment. For sure, alcohol disrupts deep sleep. That's a definitely known thing. I know that. One thing that's reliably proven to increase deep sleep is the drug GHB, but I wouldn't recommend taking that on a daily basis to get more deep sleep. But so I think it's all those things that I've mentioned: regularity, avoiding coffee, avoiding alcohol, and you want to just see the performance with the Oura Ring and see kind of in which circumstances you sleep better.
And let me just ask, if you had to optimize for one thing on your sleep, it's deep sleep versus REM versus total sleep time.
I would say it's deep sleep and REM sleep, but deep sleep is more rejuvenating to the body, REM sleep is more rejuvenating to the mind, but most people don't have as many problems with REM sleep. Yeah. People mostly have problems with deep sleep.
The other thing which is important at sleep, you haven't mentioned, but is apnea and snoring.
That's right.
So I wear what's called a mandibular appliance. So I do snore at night, and I don't have apnea. But if you've never done any kind of sleep testing, doing sleep testing, I think, is an important part.
I want to make a note and try that myself as well. I'll remember it. Thanks.
I snore, and my concern was that do I have any kind of apnea, meaning times where I stop breathing, your heart rate goes up, and that kind of stress and the acidosis actually is one of the causes of heart attacks for people at night. And so one of my friends, Peter Farrell, is the CEO of a company called ResMed, and if you look it up, they create these positive pressure masks. But they also have this mandibular appliance that you wear. It's a night guard. It keeps you from grinding your teeth as well if you grind your teeth, but also juts your lower jaw forward, which opens your airways. So I use that at night to help me snore less. Anyway,
interesting. Yeah. So you should consider, especially if you see in the data that you get a lot of wake-ups at night, etc. You should consider doing a sleep lab, which is where you go to a lab. They measure your, kind of like oxygen levels, etc. You basically sleep in the hospital and wear a lot of sensors, and they tell you whether you're likely to have sleep apnea, which is a fairly common problem. I think there's a large percentage of people who have it.
Yeah, it's a underdiagnosed, serious problem that is that I can't stress enough. It could change the quality of your life. Okay, let's move to our next subject, which is nutrition. Big one.
Absolutely. So nutrition, in terms of nutrition, the key things that I would really do that could improve your health, the biggest two things are, one, to cut out sugar in all forms. So essentially sugar is the reason for this is that sugar spikes your insulin. The faster the sugar gets absorbed into your bloodstream, the more the insulin gets spiked. And that's actually something that has a lot of negative downstream effects. So first of all, it makes you fat. It's sugar that makes you fat, not fat, because the insulin signals to the body to take up sugar from the bloodstream and store it in fat cells. The second thing is that, cancer cells actually preferentially feed on glucose because they divide very, very quickly. So they need access to fast fuel, and they're much better at consuming sugar than they are at breaking down fat and consuming ketones. This is called the Warburg hypothesis for people who are interested in learning more. So essentially you're starving cancer cells of fuel while not harming your normal cells.
So let me stress this, guys. So true. Sugar is white death. I don't know how to make it more stark than that. It's hard, but you can.
It's really hard.
But you can just say no. One of the things we'll talk about later. There's a question up here as well about metformin, which I do take. Ray Kurzweil takes metformin.
I take
it. It's one of the actions you could take. Your physician may or may not want you to do it, but it reduces the amount of sugar in your bloodstream.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that Ray takes, I think, as much as 2 grams.
That's how much I take.
I take 1 gram right now. I'll probably step it back up to 2. But is that it reduces, the current theory is it reduces your probability of cancer because it reduces the amount of blood sugar in your bloodstream. Essentially,
and then there's also evidence that Alzheimer's disease is to a significant extent caused by sugar-related metabolic systems. So some physicians even call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes to reflect on this. And then there's some evidence again that heart disease is also impacted by sugar. And these are obviously the 3 largest categories of diseases from which people die today. Plus, I mean, you get to look better. So one thing I can show is, so if you switch to the slides, so this is a graph over 4 years of my body composition. So the line that's kind of declining is my body fat percentage. I think the method that we used underestimates it by a little bit. So
what method did you do body
just
fat?
Like calipers, I don't remember what exactly it's called. Yeah, calipers. Yeah. So, but we did it, it was the same person always doing it consistently for several years. And it might be not that I'm at 7%, but at 9%. But anyway, that's a very healthy level of body fat to be at for a man. For a woman, it actually should be a bit higher. But you can see this, and this decline has been associated with really a combination of dietary interventions and sports and the supplements that I take. So you also get to look better.
And by the way, if you do start metformin, and that's up to you and your doctor, you'll lose
you will.
5 pounds of weight pretty quickly.
And let's talk about metformin a bit later, because there's a lot of stuff to discuss there. The other thing I would consider for dietary stuff is intermittent fasting. So what I do is about 3 or 4 days a week, I eat only once a day in the evening. It's a bit disruptive to sleep, but I find that I'm much sharper throughout the day if I don't eat, so I don't have this afternoon slump.
Okay, so this is really valuable. I'm taking notes of what actions I'm going to take, and I'm going to try this. So let's be very specific. When you say you do intermittent fasting, during a week, how many days do you do this, you said?
I do it 3 or 4 days a week. It's kind of, I'm not super religious about this, so it's like if on a particular day I really feel hungry, then I start to eat something during the...
But you have only one meal in the evening?
Yes, that's right.
And what time do you typically eat that meal?
7 p.m.
Okay.
Ish. So what happens is if I ate the previous night at 7 p.m. and then the next day I eat at 7 p.m., there's several really big benefits. One is that I don't have the afternoon slump. I mean, everyone knows how this feels. You have lunch and then you're stupid and you don't feel like doing stuff, and I hate that feeling. It's really annoying. So that's one benefit. Another benefit is that there's a lot of research suggesting that intermittent fasting causes a process called autophagy, which the Nobel Prize in biology was actually given to a Japanese scientist in 2016 for the discovery of autophagy. And what it is essentially that your body, when it's hungry, it starts consuming cells, and starts with damaged cells, like cancer cells and damaged immune cells. And that essentially frees up your body from junk to some extent. This sounds kind of crazy, but it's actually a scientifically validated thing.
There's a whole company called Unity Biosciences, which is built around the removal of senescent cells. It's backed by Jeff Bezos, and I just spoke to the CEO, Keith. I'm trying to bring him out to A360 this year, but it's huge impact. So yeah, that whole idea. So 3 or 4 days a week, you'll skip breakfast and lunch.
Yeah.
You'll still drink water, drink coffee.
Water and coffee and supplements. That's it. And there's 2 other interesting benefits to this. One is, so it saves a lot of time. So because there's a material amount of time that you spend on kind of getting into the eating mind frame, eating, then getting out of it. So it's quite disruptive to your day if you think about it. And that's another thing towards kind of productivity and investing time into better things. And then the other last bit is that the food in the evening tastes amazing. So you're really happy when you get down to eating. So I think I would look into that. And one other thing I want to mention.
By the way, Serge, where does someone get a biohacking shirt like this?
So actually, this is at my last company. My designers created this for me. I'll ask if we can share the designs or something like that.
Sorry, there's no place you can place right now, but I like it. I do like it. So I like that idea of, so reducing sugar, intermittent fasting, the sugar side, I get it. Of course, I relapse. I'm human. Intermittent fasting, I'm going to add. What else on the nutrition side?
So I want to make sure that I mention on the sugar bit something important. Sugar isn't just kind of the cubes of sugar or crap that you put into your coffee, or just sweets. So you don't want to drink fruit juices. Fruit juices are extremely bad for you because they're liquid sugar, so they spike your insulin extremely highly.
I've dropped all fruit juices.
Yeah, absolutely. Fresh squeezed orange juice, which is pitched as a health drink, is actually terrible for you. Yeah. So then there's things like bread, pasta, cereals, etc. You want to get rid of all those things as much as possible. And again, like, I'm also human. I'm addicted to sugar, so I do relapse from time to time. And if I go to a nice, like, Michelin-starred restaurant, I'll have their bread because it's awesome. So, it's a matter of kind of how much you improve from where you are, and it takes a long time. Don't, like, get rid of everything at once. You'll fail and you'll feel bad about it. So you should do this gradually.
And by the way, there is an addiction to sugar.
Yes,
and it will take you some number of days, but it will become easier over time.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and it's definitely highly addictive.
So let's talk about, do you do high protein, fat diets? You know, one of the friends of our community, Dave Asprey, has his whole bulletproof diet and so forth. Can you talk a little about where you are on that type of nutrition?
So I try to eat kind of ketogenic, which is high fat. So what I do is I eat mostly vegetable foods, plus fish and meat, but that are organic and high quality, essentially. I try to keep my diet mostly fat, have about 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body mass per day, which is what you should be doing if you're, like, doing weights training and that kind of thing. And
what kind of fats do you? So let's talk about
sure.
Fats.
So nuts. I love nuts. There we go. We didn't prearrange this. So nuts are great. Avocado is great. Salmon is great. I mean, if you get really nice organic meat, that's something I really enjoy. Generally, seafood tends to be good for you. I eat lots of just vegetables, spinach, celery, all kinds of stuff. And I just try to get rid of the high carb stuff. So, for example, I would not eat as much beets or, potatoes, because those are relatively high carb and low in vitamins. Out of the sugary stuff I eat berries. So, and they're actually a great way to break your sugar addiction. I try to make sure that I mostly travel around the world and stay in hotels this year. So I always ask them to remove all the candy from the room, because in the evening, your willpower drops, and that's where it becomes really easy to eat.
That's never happened to me. You raid the refrigerator. So one of the things I've done is I have a morning shake, which is spinach, avocado, some frozen blueberries, and some either coconut milk, unsweetened coconut milk, or almond milk.
Yeah, I should really get into shakes.
And so that's my morning smoothie, which I'll do on the days that I'm not doing my intermittent fasting from now on. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I'm learning here as well.
As we should.
So the ketogenic diet in particular deserves a special mention. So ketones are a fuel that the body can use instead of glucose. It comes from the fats that you consume, and essentially, the cool thing is that your body makes more units of energy, ATP, per molecule, per chemical reaction, essentially. And so you're getting more energy with fewer chemical reactions that actually slows down your aging process. And there's a lot of evidence that ketones and ketogenic diets in particular are helpful to stave off the aging process.
Do you actually measure your ketone levels?
I do from time to time, so it's just a bit of a hassle to measure it all the time.
You do that with a urinary dipstick?
It's actually better, so like you want to use blood because it's much more precise. Actually, it's more annoying, but it's precise. So, and then you see when your ketones are rising and your glucose is falling, that's the place where you want to be.
I'm going to be bringing to one of our webinars Naveen Jain, who's a friend who is the CEO of Viome. We're going to have Viome at A360 this year, and just a way of understanding what nutrition does your body best actually metabolize, and what's your microbiome best metabolize. Quick question from Dr. Nick Enger. Are there ways to monitor your breathing and sleep apnea without attending a sleep clinic? There are kits you can get delivered to your home, and you can wear it, and it's basically a nasal cannula and a blood pressure finger cuff. There's also some apps you can get that uses the microphone on your on your cell phone.
Wow.
I haven't used it. I've been told about it, but I'm sure if you look for it, it measures your snoring from the microphone. I mean, if you're sleeping alone, that is, I guess you can figure out if you're the one snoring or not.
Right.
So that's anything else on nutrition? I mean, the basics, but drinking enough water. How do you feel about coffee, water, those things?
I mean, water is obviously something very important.
But I think most people don't drink enough water. I know I don't.
I try to drink a lot of water, but I haven't paid too much attention to this. Here's the point where Peter and I both drink some water.
Cheers. Na zdrowie.
Na zdrowie, there we go.
Yeah.
So I think aside from that, I try to not add salt to my food because we tend to overconsume salt. I mean, I think that's really most of it.
So, by the way, we've hit the basics so far, right? Sleep well, eat well. I mean, these are all critically important things. We'll get to more controversial stuff as we move forward. And let me just see if there are any quick questions that we can answer here. So Darren gave a link to the mandibular appliance. Sugar cravings, addiction, likely to connect to the gut flora. What are your thoughts about
this is an interesting question. So this is kind of maybe belongs more in the testing section, but in brief, there's a lot of interesting data out of testing your microbiome, which is a test of fecal matter, so that you send in, and it tests what bacteria actually live inside you. And bacteria seem to, at the very least, be correlated with a lot of different conditions, including obesity, including diabetes, and a lot of other things. I have taken these tests. I haven't found a lot of actionable things in them. Essentially, so Peter Attia, my doctor, he mostly, kind of feels that there's nothing too actionable because there's correlation versus causation problems here. So I do take probiotics. I do try not to take antibiotics when they're not really necessary. But aside from that, I'm not sure I do anything particularly interesting on microbiome. Right.
We're going to get to your questions on metformin in a little bit. Nootropic recommendations?
Let's talk about those in the...
Okay, we'll also talk about MDMA a little bit later as well. I see a question about that. So fantastic. Any other big... so how many cups of coffee a day do you drink? I mean, there's...
Probably like 2 or 3. Coffee seems to be... There doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence that it's bad for you. There's some evidence that it might be good for you. I haven't seen anything super actionable. With a lot of these things, you just have to pick your battles and say, here's the big thing that I want to do, like get rid of sugar and do intermittent fasting. Yeah. And then you can over-optimize. You don't want to do that.
All right, let's move to our next subject, exercise.
Cool.
So we're hitting the basics here, right? Sleep, nutrition, exercise. It's a big deal.
So I try to think of exercise specifically as something to improve my metabolic health. So I'm trying to get the maximum bang for the buck from time I invest. So there's 2 things that I really do that are different from most people who exercise. One is I focus on high intensity interval training, which is you see a lot of people running on the treadmill for an hour. That's actually not that great. So it does have some benefits, but it wears down your joints. It actually burns your muscle because your body starts consuming your muscle matter, which is something you do not want. As a general point, it's really good to have more muscle and less fat in your body because muscle is more metabolically active. So it actually removes that sugar from your bloodstream and consumes it.
There is actually a correlation between amount of muscle mass and longevity. And it's something which, one of the big issues with aging is that we have what's called sarcopenia, which is a loss of muscle mass as you age. One of the areas that I'm focused on with my business partner, Bob Haruri, who is the CEO of Cellularity, we'll meet him at A360 this year, is using stem cells to actually rejuvenate your muscle building ability, because as you age, when you stress your muscle, you actually build scar tissue versus your muscle mass because you don't have the stem cells there. But again, it's something I'm working on and we'll be sharing information with you.
So high-intensity interval training is a thing where you kind of go to really peak performance for a short period of time. So for like 20 seconds, you set that treadmill to, 10 degrees up and run at 15K per hour, and you feel almost sick at the end of 20 seconds. Then you just rest and walk for a minute or two, and then you keep repeating that. Like 8 times in a row, and that gets you. Actually, there's a lot of evidence that gets you a significant amount of metabolic benefit, and less harmful side effects than someone who runs for an hour. So you get a lot more. You get a lot more value from a small amount of time spent. The second thing I focus on is essentially hip hinge exercises.
Yeah.
So the thing is, different muscles in your body have a different amount of muscle cells associated with it. So your biceps. Actually, I almost never exercise these, as you can probably see. Your biceps is a relatively small muscle, whereas your legs and your glutes are the largest by far muscles in your body. Also, the bicep is pretty close to your heart, whereas these guys are relatively far from your heart. So when you're doing deadlifts or squats or leg presses, you're getting a lot more bang for the buck because you activate a large number of muscle cells, and you have to get nutrients to them from the rest of the body. So there's really the 3 exercises, so deadlifts, squats, and leg presses that you want to do. And you want to make sure you do these with a good professional trainer to start with, because it's actually not hard to injure your lower back.
So deadlift, squats, and what are the last ones?
Leg press.
Leg press, yeah.
So what I do specifically, I do probably twice a week. I go to the gym for an hour and a half to 2 hours, where I first warm up. And in my article, there's a really good link to some videos that explain how to warm up. And then after that, I spend probably half the time on just doing a lot of sets of deadlifts or squats or leg presses. So I do like 12 sets of increasingly higher load. And after that, I do a bit of exercise on other major muscle groups like back and chest. Sometimes, rarely, like biceps and the like. And so just an hour and a half in the gym twice a week or so.
And that's your current routine?
Yes. Plus 3 times a week, I do a high intensity interval training for like 20 minutes. So. And
are doing burpees an example of high intensity?
It could be. So I personally like running just because I enjoy the runner's high that comes from that. But yeah, you can do lots of things.
So one of the things, as I was showing you around XPRIZE office, you saw my treadmill desk, and I'll try and get in 12, 15,000 steps a day doing my conference calls and so forth. Not for just to. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's great because one of the things that's really hurts people today is sitting too much. Yeah. And if instead of sitting, you're walking, that's I think there's no possible downside to that.
So pretty clear, the high intensity interval training. I completely agree with that. I've heard so many great things about it. Focusing on the larger muscle groups again, it's where if you're going to spend the time and the energy, you get the biggest payoff there. Is there anything else on?
I don't think so.
On exercise,
it's really I try to focus on those.
Any questions here on exercises, guys, that you're seeing, Bree?
I think there were some below.
Yeah, I think one of the common ones is how do you combine this type of exercise with fasting?
Actually, so that's not a problem at all. So I find that I exercise fasted almost always, actually. And I managed to to lift fairly significant weights, and I don't see any problem at all with the fasting. So one of the interesting tests that you can see among my testing routines is when you wear kind of a gas exchange analyzing mask, it tells you actually what your body is burning as fuel in your steady state regular life. And for me, it's almost 100% fat. So my body is used to not having sugar there. And that makes you more stable and resistant to not eating all the time. And it makes it easier to actually exercise while fasted. So this is something you adapt to with time.
Any other questions, Bree, on exercise?
We do have a question from Carl about, do you have an opinion on using a vibrating platform or those plates as a part of your workout or stretching?
I really have no idea. So I've seen those, they kind of feel cool, but I've never really looked into it.
Okay. And what about stretching? What is your stretching routine?
I don't do enough. If I'm exercising with a personal trainer, he kind of helps me stretch after the workout. But aside from that, like, I wish I did more.
Great. All right. So let's go to number 4, mental health, which is a big deal.
It's a huge deal. I think it's so this year, actually, my main focus has been on improving my mental health. And really, so the things that I would say are probably the biggest bang for the buck and easiest to do. The easiest one to do is psychotherapy. So I work with a psychotherapist who's a Stanford graduate with a neurobiology background. And the way it works is I show up, I send him an agenda about something I want to discuss. So for example, how do I make sure that I don't have days when I'm in a bad mood? So this is something that was annoying me, that every 3 weeks I would get 2 days of bad mood for no reason at all, or for like minor reasons that shouldn't be worth it. And then we spend an hour or two discussing this in depth with actionable steps related to either behaviors, so things like meditation, or medication. So he prescribes me some of the medication that we're gonna talk about. I treat these as educational sessions because the guy is really smart. He explains to me why I do certain things the way I do them. He sees a lot of other high-performance people who struggle sometimes with similar problems. It's very cool to talk with someone smart who understands how your brain works and to express what you're going through and hear that other people are going through the same stuff. So psychotherapy, I have read a study somewhere that said that psychotherapy is proven to significantly enhance people's happiness. So I would look into that.
Okay.
Another thing is meditation. So meditation, though, is kind of hard. So just because getting to a really good level of meditation where you're getting a lot of value takes a long time. By now, I meditate 45 minutes a day, consistently. So I'm opportunistic about it. I usually meditate in the car. So for example, I was in a car coming here, and it was like a 25-minute ride, and I can either stare into my phone.
You're not driving, I assume.
Yeah, well, right. Yeah, that's an important distinction. It might not help your longevity if you try this while driving. So I'm opportunistic. So I meditate when I cannot do anything more useful. So like when I'm in a car and being driven. Then if for whatever reason, I have too much mental self-talk, so I try to get rid of that voice in your head that kind of keeps discussing, oh, what am I going to say on Peter's podcast tomorrow? Yeah. So, hey, I should have said this differently yesterday. We all have that mental self-talk. It's actually not a good thing. So you should be trying to get yourself back into the moment as much as you can, and meditation helps that. I'm considering doing a Vipassana, the 10-day meditation retreat. I've heard really good things. It's a mindfulness meditation where you go somewhere, you give up everything, and you just meditate for 10 days in a row without talking to anyone. Yeah. So when I find time, I definitely want to do that. I've heard good things. And then, there's some good books on the subject. Yeah. There's a great book by Sam Harris called Waking Up, which I highly recommend reading. So it talks about kind of how to get value out of meditation. So some of you may be skeptical. I used to be skeptical about this stuff. I'm not religious, and some of the mystical stuff around meditation is clearly bullshit. But I think of it as people thousands of years ago found the hack that seemed to work well for kind of getting the mind into a better state. Yeah. And they assigned religious value to it because that's how you said that something was important. But it definitely works. There's a lot of scientific evidence for that meditation is good for you.
Awesome. And there are apps. There's
Headspace.
Headspace is
I would start
most
with
popular.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. If you start with Headspace, which I've done, at least it gives you some kind of a structure. And there are other apps as well. And for me, I wish I had. I shouldn't say this. I was going to say I wish I had more time, but you give time. And so for me, I'll meditate for 10, 15 minutes in the morning as part of my morning routine.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, I'm not, I don't do something as structured as that. It's more like I try to kind of, I feel like I want it. So, I fit it in when I feel like there's a bit of time. Plus I even do it in like a crowded hotel bar or something. I'll just sit cross-legged and meditate. And it's helpful because a big goal of mine is to get rid of social anxieties and social fears. Mm-hmm. So, if you do things which seem to be weird in front of a group of people,
and
it actually helps, and you don't care, it helps you become more resistant to those things. So, on that note,
yes.
The number one thing that's helped my mental health more than anything else, and it's quite simple, is MDMA. So, for those of you that don't know, MDMA is a drug. Almost everywhere it's illegal. What it does is it increases the amount of serotonin that the neurons in your brain send out, mm-hmm. and a little bit of dopamine. A lot of people use it as a party drug. I've used it as more of a self-improvement tool. So let me just describe the experience because this is interesting. So some friends of mine and we went to a big house in the countryside,
You're in Russia at this point, or here?
I don't want to say where. I shouldn't say this. Okay. So
you were someplace where it was not illegal. Okay.
There's actually a place like that, Portugal. So in Portugal, all drugs are at least decriminalized.
Yeah.
So we get this big house, set up a nice music system, have like nice rugs, Buddhist paintings on the wall, kind of fireplace. And take it with a group of friends, specifically with a desire to be social. So the things that happen after you take it is, first of all, you're completely in the moment. So all that self-narrative is gone. You cannot even imagine yourself thinking about what you're going to say to someone a couple days from now. And the other thing is that all your social fears completely go away. So let me give you an example. I was kind of anxious when going into this. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll have some crazy panic attack. I'm anxious. And this girl who I've met like an hour before, she just comes around and hugs me and kind of talks me through why I'm worried, etc. And then, I'm in a really good state of mind. I get out from under her. I see her husband is sitting right there. So I'm like, you don't mind that I've been, hugging your wife for the last hour? So, and he's like, well, I was kind of jealous, but I figured you should help get into the vibe. So in other words, it becomes super easy to talk with people about things that are usually left unsaid. Mm-hmm. So, that feeling when you talk with someone and there's a break in the conversation and there's this uncomfortable silence, that goes away. So you just kind of are comfortable with silence. And for me, the reason it's been impactful is that I was an introverted person and I was finding it really hard to tell people how I feel because I felt like they would judge me. And in this particular experience, I've only taken it twice in my life. And it's actually been a permanent change because what happened is I kind of felt, hey, I can behave in this way and everybody likes me this way. And then I just started, it was great for all kinds of things. I made up with people who I had fights with before by saying, hey, you're an important person in my life, etc. I found it much easier to say things like, hey, let's record a sex video. So, and people would be like, yeah, why didn't you ask before? And I was shy. So now all that shyness kind of goes away. So that's cool. If you do it, I mean, be smart about it, make sure you don't get in legal trouble, and there's...
and make sure you drink a lot of water.
Yes, so there's a lot of guidelines online as to what you want to make sure there's certain drugs like MOI inhibitors that you cannot take on you cannot combine it with MDMA, and there's certain guidelines like drinking a lot of water but not too much. There's some balance. Yeah. But in general, so if we cut to the slides, basically a lot of the evidence seems to suggest that MDMA, which here is labeled as ecstasy, is actually slightly different, but MDMA is a lot less harmful than tobacco or alcohol as long as you follow certain safety procedures. So as are some of the other illegal drugs, but I don't think we need to really.
I mean, I'll just say my experience with MDMA is exactly the same as yours.
Cool.
It's also just recently been approved for treating post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD, in a very significant fashion. In fact, it's been like the only thing that's had proven effect for it. So one has to remember that drugs are something you have to make your own decisions on. You can seek your physician's opinion on it. But at the end of the day, what is legal and what is illegal changes from culture to culture and time to time.
Coffee used to be illegal in England for, I think, about 100 years. And they justified it as people get into coffee houses with malicious intent against the king. So... which might have been true.
All right, so we're on mental health, psychotherapy, meditation, Sam Harris's book, Waking Up, the potential for experimenting with MDMA, which is someone can decide if that's the right thing for them or not. Anything else on mental health?
There's a couple other things. So I found it very beneficial in terms of mental health to try to bring my private self and my public self together. I think a large part of the problems we have as individuals is from the fact that we don't say who we really are. We're stuck in kind of relationships that are based on lies to some extent. And what I tried doing, and this is also based on a great book by Sam Harris, which is called Lying, is I try to deliberately always tell the truth, even if it's something that could be possibly be hurtful to someone. Like if someone asks, do I look fat in this dress? I mean, it's actually better to be consistently honest, because then people will trust you more. If you tell your kids that Santa Claus exists, they'll find out at some point that you've been lying, and they'll ask themselves, what else is he being lying to me about, right?
So the idea of getting rid of your split personality.
Yes, and to me, so I feel like it's actually possible to consistently never lie in your life. I think back to stupid things I've lied about in the past, and it's silly stuff. Like at some time, I lied about being a year younger because I wanted to appear more impressive. This didn't make me happier at all. Like it did nothing good for me. So I tried to pretty aggressively get rid of that. So the other thing that I feel is related to this is I try to be really open about my sexual preferences. So, I don't believe in monogamy so much because I always feel the frustration of not, having sex with other women. And I try to be really open about this because I feel like it's nothing to be particularly embarrassed of. And our society really represses that. And so I feel like it's healthy to just say what you think. And if you feel you're not allowed to do that by your partner or by your job, because some people, I was talking to someone from Wall Street who just says my partners are so conservative, I'll get fired if I say any of this stuff that you say. So if that's the case, maybe you want to change partners or your job, because they're built on a personality which is not actually true, and you want to be as true to your personality as you can be.
And that's a simple but so deep notion. And I know a lot of people, including myself at different times in my life, where I'm externally this way and in reality this way. And your ability to always, and I take pride to a large degree of I wear my emotions and who I am on my sleeve. And I don't have to play a game. It's
and
hard.
And I think what's really important though is that people really like this. You would think that people don't. You would think that when you're open about like, hey, I wanna, I don't know, have sex with lots of women, or hey, you know, you do actually look fat in this dress, that kind of thing. Where you say that, you think that people will dislike you for it, but it's actually not true. So people appreciate authentic people because they want to be that way. Everyone has the same insecurities that they have in life. Like, I don't know, I used to have a huge insecurity about my height when I was a kid. So, and like when you kind of are open about those things, you're, you know, people like it. It's,
All right,
it's a good hack.
A couple of questions here. How did you find your psychotherapist? Did you make sure you found a good one that was willing to work with you on your goals? Any initial thoughts there?
So I was lucky. My psychotherapist is it works with Peter Attia, who is my doctor. So he recommended him to me, and there was like a great match because the guy is focused specifically on improving performance. I think it's important to find a good psychotherapist. I don't have any advice. I mean, I would try to look for referrals, really.
What's your experience with any other hallucinogenics, LSD or anything else?
I haven't actually tried them. So my thing is, so MDMA was like the first proper drug I've tried, and it only happened earlier this year. So I'm a late bloomer, I'm 32. So, but I haven't tried LSD yet. I want to try LSD. I'm planning to do it. It just seems like something you want to try in the right mindset, in the right environment. I've tried GHB.
What is GHB?
So GHB is a precursor to GABA, and what it does is it essentially affects you in a way that's similar to alcohol, but without a hangover. It's actually, it's safer, but the only problem with it is that it's very dose dependent. So if you get the dose wrong, you could screw yourself up. But it feels much nicer than alcohol. You're just very social, a bit like MDMA. It seems to be, as long as you get the dose right, it's not harmful, etc. And it actually improves your sleep. So that's the only things that I've really tried, but I'm excited about it.
Is there a question here from Lewis is, are there ways to achieve MDMA states without mind-altering substances?
So I found that I got close to the MDMA state twice in my life from exceptionally good meditation. So this was both times, it was in a sensory deprivation chamber. It's called floating, you know, this chamber where you lie on salted water. There's no sound, no sight, no touching or anything else. And after an hour in that, I got like the MDMA kind of mind state for maybe an hour afterwards. It's really hard. So I think, like, personally, nothing compares with the MDMA state. It's hard to get there without the MDMA.
Its intensity. There was a question from Ahmed about what is the name of the 2-gram supplement they take.
Metformin.
Yeah, metformin.
We'll talk about this.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute, also called glucophage. So are there any other questions before we go to medical testing on mental health, Bree, that you want to bring up?
I think it would be helpful for the community to elaborate a little bit more on anxiety and how you manage it, what supplements you can use for it, because it's a common thing right now.
Anxiety is a really, so I used to have a problem with anxiety, and actually I had like anxiety attacks some years ago, and this was actually something that prompted me to get more into health optimization, because it's a really unpleasant experience. So I think all these things actually help manage anxiety. So meditation certainly does, certainly sleep, certainly exercise, certainly losing weight, all of these things. There's actually data suggesting that it's correlated with a lower amount of anxiety. So I think it's really everything. I'm not sure, but one of my key goals in this whole thing is to keep anxiety low, to be calm, because anxiety really interferes with your performance and obviously with the quality of your life. So we can talk, I mean, when we get to the medical and supplements, we can talk about the anxiety there.
One more, Bree?
I think that just about
all right.
wraps us up.
So next, we're going to category 5, and you have it listed as medical testing.
Yeah.
So what kind of testing, I mean, you do it, you know, you spend $200,000 on tests. What is it?
So I switched to the screen that that shows some of those tests. I'll share, actually, so I'll share with Peter, and hopefully he can distribute to the whole community a list of all the tests that I do and all the supplements that I do. And feel free, by the way, to share it with, you know, your friends. I don't mind. I have no sense of privacy. So no.
Which is an interesting, by the way, the whole psychology of being open and free, and if you're not, is a freeing element, right?
Totally. And actually, I'm not even sure why people don't want to show.
They fear criticism. They
fear
critique.
I think that's true. So in terms of testing, I mean, the most important thing is to just do an extended panel of blood tests. So you cannot really narrow it down to just 1 or 2 tests because there's a lot of variables. I mean, just so you understand, our blood has about 100,000 proteins, distinct, unique proteins in it, and about 10 million antibodies. It's an exceptionally complex biochemical substance. And we're trying to essentially find a bunch of markers in your blood that are related to various diseases, processes, etc. So the most important ones, I mean, just in brief, it's stuff to do with lipids, not just HDL, LDL, but things like LPA, and basically a deep analysis of your lipidology. It's stuff to do with... Let
me just ask real quick, I don't know if we're going to talk about it later, anti-cholesterol meds, in terms of, what do you call them?
Statins.
Statins, thank you, statin drugs. There's such a debate between pros and cons of statins.
So I'm considering, I'm in a pretty good shape. I'm considering taking statin microdoses. And I have a thing called LPA, elevated, it's a genetic factor which elevates your risks of cardiovascular disease. This is actually a great example of why, you know, some people say, oh, you shouldn't screw with nature. Nature made you the right way. LPA is this blood factor that helps coagulation of blood. Yeah. So if you get bitten by a saber-toothed tiger, then your chances of survival are better if you have high LPA. But, you know, when you're 80, you're much more likely to have a heart attack. And the evolutionary algorithm obviously optimized for the tiger, but that's obviously not, you know, what we should be concerned about here, you know. So statins I'm thinking about, but let's give an overview of the test. So you want to test the glucose metabolism pathway. That's a really important one. So one of the best tests there is the oral glucose tolerance test. You take your blood, check the glucose and insulin. You drink a disgusting vial of pure dextrose, so pure sugar, and then you see how much insulin is required to remove the glucose from your blood and where the glucose gets to.
I just did this yesterday. If you order the Viome kit, V-I-O-M-E, it comes with a little glucose meter, finger sticks, and a powder that you drink, and you do a glucose challenge test.
Yeah, that's the other name for it. And so for my case, when I do that, my glucose drops, so a very small amount of insulin is required to drop my glucose so low that most people would get hypoglycemia. I get to like 40 or 45 milligrams per deciliter, which usually gets people hypoglycemic. That's just because my body is so sensitive to insulin, because I never drink, you know, pure dextrose or eat stuff that's similar, that a small amount of insulin really gets rid of all the glucose in my blood. And that's really what you want to be, because if you keep your glucose constantly low in your blood, that helps stave off diseases and a lot of other things. You definitely want to test hormones. So we'll talk about hormones. It's a big area of potential optimization. So I take thyroid hormones, T3 and T4. natural thyroid hormone is kind of below average, and I push it to above average slash kind of top, I think like 75th percentile probably, and that instantly has an impact on your energy level and on your mood, which is something you really do want. And there's actually, you're not doing anything unnatural. You're just pushing yourself from one part of the human distribution to another part on this particular dimension. And it's actually also a bioidentical hormone. So, it's unlikely to do anything there that your normal hormones would not do. And that's a noticeable effect.
Yep.
So I also do, so one thing I'll show is kind of a combination of testing and drugs, but so while testing my sex hormones, one thing you see is that my pituitary, it's a signaling hormone gland in your brain, it creates certain inputs, LH and FSH, from which testosterone is then made. And I kind of had average slash below average testosterone and very low inputs into it. And testosterone that gets converted into estrogen, and the estrogen is received at the pituitary as a signal to make less inputs. So that's how the feedback loop in the body works. And so what I did was I took an estrogen receptor blocker which competes with estrogen at the pituitary. And so the pituitary thinks there's less testosterone and you should produce more, essentially more LH and FSH. That's a very individualized, targeted input that it's not like you inject yourself with testosterone. You actually signal the body to produce more. Mm-hmm. And so what I got, so keep the slides. So what I got was a very significant increase in free testosterone, which is the bioactive form that you want to have through this targeted intervention. So you shouldn't copy me on this. The important thing is that this is individualized. This is the combination of smart testing, a good endocrinologist who happens to be Peter in this case, and the targeted intervention. So that's kind of one of the most successful things I've seen. And this also helps have more energy. I mean, well, you see, you kind of like think a lot more about sex. But yeah, it helps with energy, helps with mood. It also helps with muscles and with kind of burning fat, because that's a major important system. So the other things I would test is inflammatory biomarkers, so things like CRP, and then there's some others. I'll share the list, because inflammation is actually, so silent low-grade inflammation is a process that advances most metabolic diseases in the body.
Inflammation in the body is the killer. One of the big benefits of stem cell therapies is that they reduce inflammation in the body, an anti-inflammatory effect. Cool, what else?
So I would test vitamin D. So vitamin D is something that almost everyone in America is deficient in. I think I had a...
And how much do you take?
I take a fair amount. I think...
I take about 10,000.
Oh, wow. That's even more than I do. I think I take like 6,000. So it takes... So vitamin D is something that almost everybody is deficient in, unless you're a lifeguard on the beach in Israel. So, and you get sun all the time. And it seems there's a correlation between higher levels of vitamin D and a lot of kind of disease prevention. So there's some, I'll share again kind of like what my levels are and what the therapeutic levels appear to be. You have to take it for a long time to get it into the right zone, the right zone. And you just want to test it from time to time to make sure you are in the right zone. You want to take iron, sorry, not take iron, test iron.
Yes.
It's actually better for iron to be relatively low, although not anemic. So, for men especially, because women lose blood all the time, and that's actually one of the hypotheses for why women live longer, because they have lower levels.
They menstruate and lose their iron in their...
Exactly. So they have lower iron levels in the blood. So some people have super high iron levels. I have some friends like that, and they try to actually donate blood in order to just lower their iron load. So I would really, the biggest thing is to just do some basic testing, it's hard to interpret this stuff, unfortunately. So in the world today, there's very few doctors who specialize in preventative medicine. So it's a real problem. So when I started doing this, at some point I tested and saw I had elevated mercury levels in the blood. And I came to my doctor, who was an expensive doctor in a high-end hospital, and he was like, oh, you should just, I don't know what to do with this. Come back when you have uncontrollable tremors. I'm like, yes, that actually happened. So I'm like, I don't want to have uncontrollable tremors. That's the whole point. So doctors today are really actively just going after fixing disease after it has manifested.
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem. There's very few people who know how to interpret
What kind
this.
of toxin screens do you do?
So I did, there's a thing called Genova Diagnostics Toxic Effects Core or some test like that. What it tests is a bunch of volatile organic compounds, so like benzene, styrene in your blood. And I found that I had some of those elevated. I stopped drinking from hot liquids from plastic containers, tried to kind of not be even next to people who smoke, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's most of it. I mean, on the testing, there's some other stuff. There's, some genetic tests. To be honest, genetics right now is a lot of promise, a great area of research, but there's not a lot of actionable stuff quite yet.
I think one of the things that we're going to see is results from HLI this year at A360 as the numbers grow. The other part, and you'll learn more about this company called Viome that my friend Naveen Jain has created. And what they look at is not your genetics; they look at your RNA expression. So it's not, so your genes are your potential. Your RNA expression is actually which of your genes are being expressed in your body.
That's really cool.
And you can look at how that changes because your RNA expression, so DNA is your code. The genes that are turned on actually go, you
get
transcribe to
executed.
RNA, and then the RNA is made into a protein. And so you may have the genes, but they're not expressed, or you may have the genes that are expressed when you take different foods or different environmentals, and you can see how that changes over time. The other thing which you can do is in your gut, what Viome will do is look at not only what microbes are present, but which microbes are actually active.
Oh, so they look at metabolites.
You look at the RNA of the microbes,
okay.
and so you can look at the RNA of viruses, of all kinds of things. So. Anyway, we'll be sharing that with you at A360 digitally on the webinar and also at the event.
The cool thing about the whole genetics area is that there's so much data there that there's going to be a lot of opportunity to analyze it. I think there's a company in China that's creating actually a toilet that has a DNA sequencer built in so that you can cheaply get constant dynamic data on what's happening with your body, which is actually going to be the toilet. Bizarrely enough, that's going to be the biggest source of medical data in the future because it's so easy to get it all the time. So, anyways,
med tests. What can you do to get our doctors to support extended blood panel tests? Doctors tend to be quite conservative and behind the times.
There's only one answer. You get to change your doctors. Yeah. So unfortunately, because, think about it. Doctors mostly have sick people coming to them, not people who want to do preventative medicine. Doctors don't want to get sued. Doctors don't want to be, ostracized by their community for doing stuff that is unorthodox because they've spent like 10 years just studying in order to get the license. They're not gonna risk this. So I feel like the only way is to go to a different doctor.
Stephen Koch here says it's GHB can be highly addictive. Check your DNA markers before taking.
Yeah, look, both GHB and MDMA and alcohol, obviously, and cigarettes, these things can all be highly addictive. So it's important that you kind of approach this in the right way and control the situation. So this is not something I would suggest to everyone by any means. So you have to be smart.
Well, my friend Jose Vargas asks, what about probiotics? Which ones do you recommend?
I don't remember the brand. I do take probiotics and I take prebiotics, which is actually, so probiotics are a capsule with like 25 billion bacteria, the good kind. And then prebiotics are the food for that bacteria, which you can take together to help the bacteria actually
And we'll distribute
adapt.
what you're taking.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 10 minutes. Let's go to supplements and drugs, which is really one of the richest areas. I don't want to shortchange it, but let's dive in.
Sure. So I will share the list of supplements. It's also in my post online. It's something that I think supplements are probably effective, but we often don't know because it's really hard to get the cause-consequence relationships. But if you're taking a supplement of curcumin or of like green tea powder, it's unlikely that it's going to cause any problems for you. Yeah. So for me, the risk, it's essentially a risk-adjusted decision where we have asymmetric risk. There's not a lot of downside and there's potential upside. So I take a lot of supplements. So actually, this is what I take every day basically on the screen here. And this doesn't include the actual meds. Let's talk about the meds because that's the most important, the most interesting thing. I wouldn't say it's most important actually. The metformin. Metformin is a med that helps reduce your blood sugar. And people are excited about it because this is one of the most prescribed drugs in history. I think that it's one of the top 5 or 10 drugs.
And it's become a generic, which means it's cheap.
It's dirt cheap. It's like cents per day. And there's a lot of data. So tens, if not hundreds of millions of people have taken metformin over the last 50 to 70 years. And it appears to be extremely safe as long as you don't have really degraded kidney function. So what people noticed is that diabetics on metformin live longer than non-diabetics, which is bizarre because diabetes is a very debilitating condition which is associated with all sorts of problems. And they started analyzing, and it seems that by keeping your blood sugar lower, it has some preventative effects on cancer and atherosclerosis and neurodegenerative diseases. The FDA has actually just started a trial on metformin for the prevention of aging. This is a big deal.
I mean, guys, you got to understand this. This is the whole concept that you could talk about aging as a disease and to prevent aging, and that the FDA, and there are a number of trials. There's a trial down in Australia as well, a large-scale trial on metformin. So it is a big deal.
It's a huge deal, exactly because of what you said. This is a very conservative medical organization. And so I take metformin. Most people
you take 2 grams. How do you take it?
I take 1 gram in the morning. I take 1 gram in the evening. I take extended release versions because they tend to be less gastrointestinally unpleasant. Sometimes you get some gastrointestinal distress on it. And that's it. I honestly think that almost everyone should take metformin.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a proponent of it for myself. Again, it's something which I recommend to my family members. It's up to you whether you want to take it, do the research. There had been a paper shown me by my friend Martine Rothblatt that showed a potential correlation between metformin and Alzheimer's. And I'm still, I'm trying to track that down.
The hard thing is that, it's so hard to analyze which of the papers have the right kind of procedures, etc. So what I do is, I'm fortunate enough to have Peter, who's got a team of researchers who analyze the documents, and I see basically all my doctors take metformin. Yeah. So when I see that, that's a sign to me that I should be going.
Okay, what's next?
So I would say modafinil is a very, very interesting drug. So modafinil is a drug that people started taking initially to reduce the need for sleep. I think it was first of all tried by like fighter pilots.
Yeah, it was developed. It's a drug which I've tried. I use it whenever I'm traveling overseas. If I have to get off an airplane and go on stage right away, I will use modafinil. It's sort of like wakes you up, makes you very focused and very sharp. It was developed and used by fighter pilots that needed to be alert and sharp after long missions. The thing I find interesting is there are no real downsides to it.
Right. So a team of people at Oxford have reviewed all the scientific literature on modafinil in healthy people. So not sleep-deprived people, not people who have narcolepsy.
It's used in narcolepsy
healthy,
as well.
Yeah. Healthy people. And they found that there was actually a material improvement in executive function, so in solving the more complex problems, and no side effects. So I take it every day. I used to take Adderall, which is a much harder amphetamine medication, which actually I think was causing some of my anxiety issues in the past. And I took it a long time, for like 5 or 6 years every day. But I got off of it, replaced it with modafinil, and it just makes your head clearer. It's like you're on coffee all the time.
So how much modafinil do you take in the morning?
Between 100 and 200 milligrams. So I take a minimum of 100 and I up it to 200 if, for example, I didn't sleep as well. You want to make sure you take it in the morning as soon as you wake up, because it has a fairly long-lasting effect and it might interfere with your sleep.
One of the things that's important is do not drink alcohol if you are taking modafinil.
Yeah, I mean, generally, so yeah, same about metformin actually. So you do not want to mix alcohol with metformin. Yet another reason not to drink alcohol. Everyone should look into hormones. So I mentioned the stuff I do with testosterone, so through the estrogen receptor inhibitor, and the T3 and T4. I've sometimes taken small doses of growth hormone because my IGF-1 levels are really low, but that's controversial because low IGF-1 levels are actually protective against a lot of cancer, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, just on growth hormone, I would advise against. We have no idea what the effects on cancer.
Yeah, I mean, I would the only reason I've even tried it is because my natural levels are quite low. So, but generally, my conclusion is don't do that. Consider lithium microdoses. So I take about 100 milligrams of lithium on a daily basis, so we naturally get maybe 3 milligrams just in water. And then people who have bipolar disorder, they get like 2,000 milligrams of
2 grams.
Yeah, 2 grams of lithium. I take 100 milligrams. It just makes you a little bit calmer and a little bit more stress resistant.
But you do this under a doctor's prescription.
Yes. Yeah. So, so my doctor, actually, there's some evidence that lithium causes neurogenesis. So it's in adult brains, makes adult brains grow new neurons. And the last thing I will mention today is SSRI antidepressants. So I take a small dose of escitalopram, which is the latest generation SSRI. And the reason I take it is because I feel like good mood and resistance to stress are very key determinants of not just happiness, but of productivity. You don't want stress to kind of get you out of the groove. And these guys, they're fairly safe. I actually also tested my pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics of my genome. There's some genes that are favorable to not having side effects and having good results. It just feels like everything's a bit nicer, and this was a material help to avoid any dips in mood. So yeah, this is something just to consider. I like it. My doctors also take it. So
cool. So let me power through a few of the questions, and if you stick with us for 5 more minutes here. All right, metformin is a prescription drug. Berberine, if I'm pronouncing it properly, appears to be a natural alternative. What do you think about berberine? Would you have the same enhanced age effects?
I don't know. The reason I take metformin rather than berberine is just that there's more data. So there's a lot more data on metformin's efficacy. So that's the reason. Do I want to live forever? That's a good question.
Should you take metformin if you're on a ketogenic diet? What are your thoughts on ketosis?
I do. I think ketosis is a great state to be in. So I haven't seen anything to suggest you shouldn't mix the two.
If I ever start a country, I'm going to name one of the states ketosis.
Nice. I like that.
I live in ketosis. What are your thoughts on CBD?
I'm not sure what that is.
I don't know what CBD is either. If you want to put in the notes there what CBD is, I will answer. So Francis asked, do you want to live forever, which allows us to truly explore distant stars and planets? What steps are you taking now and in the future to reach this goal? So that's what this whole webinar is about. And yes, I do want to live for as long as possible.
I think, like for me, I certainly want to live forever. I think that it is about exploring the world, the universe, and finding out how everything works. And I feel like, you know, I feel like our bodies certainly have a shelf life, which we're going to get to at some point. So at some point you want to upload and merge with technology and become something better. So
Dr. Nick Enger asks, how long do you want to live? Peter wants to live to 700.
I genuinely want to live for millions of years. So
that's good. I'm sure when I get to 700, I want to live for to at least 800 as well. And so it's crazy for us to be having this conversation, right? I mean, it's truly insane to be, I mean, society has taught us that, you know, even to strive towards 100 or 120 or 150. And the challenge is, unless you're in your 80s or 90s now, if you're in your 50s or 60s or 30s or 40s, we forget the notion that over the next 20 years, we're going to be literally intercepting an exponential amount of technology. Right?
Yeah.
In the next 10 years, we're going to make as much progress biologically as we made in the last 100 years. Think about this, a huge amount of data, the amount of AI parsing that data, the discoveries we're making on not only genomics, but about regulatory mechanisms in the body, on stem cells and stem cell sciences are just exploding. And if you don't think that billionaires and millionaires are going to be spending a huge amount of money funding this research and using this technology,
absolutely,
you know, guess again. So I think we're going to see a huge amount. You and I talked about before this, Ray Kurzweil's prediction on the notion of longevity escape velocity, which I love that terminology. It's a notion that for every year you are alive, science is lengthening your life for more than a year, so you effectively are divergently in the positive sense. He says it's 10 to 12 years away. You think we're there already?
So think about it this way. A relatively well-off person in a developed country, so in the US today dies at about 95. That's actually close, like 93. So and there's a continued gain in life expectancy over the last 40 years, even in wealthy countries except for the US, of about 2.5 years per decade. Just extrapolating some of those trends, even without exponential technology, which I think is absolutely a thing, we are going to live to about 120. Mm-hmm. So if you think about 120, so, you know, Peter, how old are you?
I'm 56.
56. So Peter's got like 60, 70 years without any technological progress. Think about where we are going to be in 2087. I mean, 70 years ago, we didn't even know what a gene was. I think like they only discovered the gene as an idea in 1952 or something. And assuming that that's not going to be completely crushed by the progress in the next few years.
I wouldn't mention that to Mendel, but the notion of Francis and Crick, the structure of DNA and so forth. Yes, I mean we're going to be, but we're just at the beginning of understanding why we age. The question is, why should we age? Why do we die? I mean, there is a rational reason. Which, when food was scarce back 1,000 years ago or 1,000,000 years ago, if you lived for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years, you would take food away as the stronger adult from your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, and they would not survive and your gene would not be passed along. And also because women don't have babies past the age of, you know, pick your number, 30, 35, 40, if you had a genetic disease in the later part of life, you would never pass that along, so it was never selected against. Mm. And so these are two of the fundamental reasons, and we're going to take that level of evolution back into our own hands. CBD stands for cannabidiol. It's basically a non-psychoactive part of marijuana.
I haven't researched into it. I mean, I never liked the pot experience.
Made you feel stupid.
You feel stupid. Also, actually, so this is interesting. If you do smoke pot, you should just vape THC, because at some point I smoked like a joint, and then it's funny, I did that toxicology test the next day, and the toxins were off the charts on like benzene, styrene, all of this unpleasant stuff. And don't smoke. I mean, like but I'm hoping that if you're here talking to us about this, then
yes, if you are a smoker, forget everything we said and just do one thing: stop smoking. Pal, I'm going to take a second and summarize what my notes are for everybody. So sleep, measure it. We'll get you an Oura Ring at A360 this year, or go online and order one now. Wake up at the same time every morning. Consider doing a sleep lab. If you do snore, you can ask the person that you sleep next to or that you may have slept with whether you snore, or you can record your night and find out. Consider a mandibular appliance. It's great for not grinding your teeth, which can break your crowns or your molars. Okay, so that's from sleep. And nutrition, number one, white death. Cut out your sugar. It means no juice, no fruit juice. Fruit juice is liquid sugar. Carbs, white pastas, white rice convert to sugar in your bloodstream very quickly. Consider doing what I'm going to do, and I'm so on this right now, 3 to 4 days a week, intermittent fasting. Skip your breakfast and lunch, just do a dinner. Your ketogenic diet is exactly what I do. I am as much veggies as I can pound, plus fish. I don't do beef or chicken. That's just my own preference. Exercise, high interval training versus going for a mile, just like you said, 20 seconds at a high grade as fast as you can go, and then walking and repeating that. Focusing on your hip and your lower legs, deadlifts, squats, leg presses. You do it twice a week for 90 minutes, 2 hours. Mental health, meditation, consider psychotherapy. Sam Harris's books, which I have not read, which I will read, Waking Up and Lying. MDMA as a potential experiment someone may want to do. How do you line your actions in your life with how you actually feel, so you don't split your personality, reduces the stress there. Medical testing, T3, T4, your thyroid levels, your thyroxine levels, and then your testosterone levels, your vitamin D levels, your toxin scans. On medicines, metformin, again, I'm going to increase my dose from 1 gram to 2 grams. I used to be at 2 grams, I'll go back to it. Modafinil, which I take when I travel. I may try this as a 100 milligram morning supplement and see how I feel on that. I'll look at my T3, T4, consider supplementing it. I'll look at my testosterone levels again. I'm probably not going to try lithium or SSRI, but you've tried it and had good impact with that. Maybe someday I will. But that's a quick summation. We will circulate all of the testing that you've been doing and the supplements that you've been doing.
Yeah.
And anything in closing you want to say to the group here?
So I'm really glad to talk with you guys. I'm hoping that you can get into this. Our bodies and minds are our most important assets. It's super rewarding to invest in them. You start feeling better, you start looking better, and this is a thing, because people will be doing this stuff to enhance their performance. And if you want to be competitive in society, this is going to be important. Like, think about if you have more energy and more focus on a daily basis for decades, you invest that in studying, in reading new books, into developing relationships. Think about how much more value you're going to get over that period of time. So I think I just want to leave you with that message. If you guys have any other questions, just find me on Facebook, send me a message. I respond to almost everything I get. And
what's your Facebook?
It's just Serge Faguet, Faguet. I think my handle is Serge F / Facebook Serge F. So feel free to message me there. If any of you are in San Francisco, I'm doing a talk at the Battery Club on Thursday evening about this. And if you want an invite, just ping me on Nook. I really hope you guys get value out of this and kind of take it further. And Peter, thanks very much for inviting me to do this.
No,
this was awesome.
A real pleasure. All right, guys, 2 things to close out. Number 1, if you have not downloaded your Abundance Digital app, please do. It's on the App Store for both Android and the iPhone. I use this every day. I hope you will as well. My goal is to use this as a means where you and I can communicate, where I can address questions, where the community, again, all of this is about building a community of abundance-minded, exponential thinkers. And so please join and engage and answer people's questions and give people encouragement. There is no crazy idea the day before something is truly a breakthrough. It's a crazy idea. So engage, support people in that regard. And then let's see, our next webinar is going to be on Monday, December the 18th at 10:30 a.m. It's going to be with Mark Goodman. Mark is my nemesis. I say that with a smile. Mark is an incredible thinker on the future of cybersecurity. And we're going to go and talk about how to protect yourself. I'm probably super exposed. And he's going to help me put in the reasonable protections that any intelligent person should have. So you'll get a notice about this Monday, December 18th, 10:30 a.m. Me and Mark Goodman talking about cybersecurity, how to protect yourself. And so here we are talking about protecting ourselves health-wise and mentally and physically and then digitally. All right, guys, take care. Have a great week.
Bye.
Thanks.
All right.